I'm Jennifer. I live in Europe. Today I'm going to talk about my story running away from my narcissistic parents after 30 years of abuse. My parents, my mother and my father, were just very atypical. I don't really have that many memories of them together, or of us together, and the ones I do, I just remember a lot of yelling, a lot of shouting. I have memories of me crying. That's pretty much it. I don't really have any of those memories or nice stories that people around my age would talk about with their families. Sometimes I felt like there was something different about me. I just couldn't really pinpoint what it was. I just felt that my father was very absent. I didn't really see him much. And my mother, she was always there, but physically always there. But emotionally, there was just a kind of wall that separated me and her. And I just felt like I never really was able to get to her. And she was just very cold. Even years later, when she tried to be closer physically, as in trying to hug me or something, it just felt very fake because it's not something that she would usually do at all. Everything just seemed very rehearsed, as if she was just following a new script suddenly as I grew up. I felt that everyone had these really fun times during the weekends, especially. I didn't have these stories to tell because my mother was either off working, or when she was present, it was all about her. It was like the mom show. And with my father, the times that I did spend with him, he was very aggressive to me. He liked spending all of his time in his computer. And I wanted some company. I wanted someone to be able to, do basic parenting things like cooking lunch or serving breakfast. He wasn't there. He was always in front of his computer. And when he wasn't, he just was really bothered that I was in my room playing and talking with my Barbies. He would walk into the room when I was playing my Barbies and tell me that I was acting up and making too much noise. I wasn't at all. He would just keep insisting that I was misbehaving, that I would have to learn the lesson. So he would grab me by the arm, drag me across the floor into the bathroom, take off his belt, and just belt me until I was not really responsive anymore. And that's my biggest memory of him, is just remembering him doing this and me just in that moment thinking and saying, please don't do this. I'm sorry. And I was apologizing, and part of me was thinking, why am I apologizing? And part of me was thinking, okay, maybe I am all wrong. Maybe there's just something wrong with me. That's why I don't deserve the love and nurturing that I see other parents give my schoolmates, my friends. Even then, I grew up thinking that treatment was normal and that I kind of deserved it, because I wasn't allowed to spend that much time with friends from school. So there was no sleepovers, there was no going to my friends after class or anything like that. Although I don't remember much about my childhood besides the coldness from my parents, I do some of the things that I didn't really remember myself. I saw in pictures, and I see in pictures of myself as a child, where I have photos of myself in the park crying with my mother just standing next to me and pulling me. So I don't even understand why a parent would take that photo, keep that photo. And that's most of my pictures as a kid. I'm either smiling and I can kind of see the pain in my eyes and my smile, sort of. I don't know if it's because I know myself, so I know what's behind that. I'm looking at these other pictures where I just seem so sad and sensitive. I've tried to make a really big effort in trying to remember something really good about me as a child or as a kid, but all I can remember is yearning to be older so I can be free. Even as a little kid, I would already, as a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old, whatever, yearn to be an adult so I could just be free and travel the world and not feel like I don't belong on Earth. I always had that feeling of there's something really wrong with me, or there's something strange in me, because I'm either asking the wrong questions, or I'm asking the question why too much when we get to that age where we're asking always why. There's something wrong that's really annoying adults, because the few adults that are around me don't understand me and don't seem to want to understand me. Now that I'm older, I see that it's just that lack of empathy that is so typical of a narcissistic parent. It's that lack of connection, because there's no connection when it comes to a narcissist. You can't connect to a narcissist. So emotionally, you just can't. The belting was pretty bad, but one of the things is just, I felt like I was always being monitored. Eventually, my parents, they separated. The way they separated, it was just about my mother. She didn't really separate. Her reason wasn't me or protecting me or any of that, so that wasn't really it. So eventually they separated, and she started seeing someone else, which came to be my stepfather. At first, I didn't have a really good feeling about him because I felt like he was using the same games that she was, which was giving me gifts to try to buy my trust. So gift giving has always been a very strange thing for me. For some people, it's a love language, but for me, it's always that thing that takes me aback. You know, I receive a gift and I'm just, what does this person want from me? What do they want to buy my silence for? Or what do I have to do in return? What do I have to exchange? What can I do? You know, because it never came from a genuine place, and that's what I remember often. So I always felt like anytime there was a fight, anytime there was something that, now looking back, you know, that it would just be best for me to not remember the next day, but there was always a gift. There was always something material for me. There was never an apology. Sometimes even as a kid, when your parent shouts at you and you feel sad because you don't want your parent to shout at you, you feel, you know, you don't want to disappoint them. Sometimes just an I'm sorry for yelling at you, I love you, that would have been enough, and it would have been free. It wouldn't have cost a thing, but I wasn't granted that kind of thing. I was granted material things. Having the feeling I was always being surveilled, and that anything I said, I always had this feeling that there was like a hidden camera watching me, but it wasn't like a real camera. I wasn't hallucinating. It was just this kind of, it was a way that I kind of found to romanticize my life, but at the same time kind of freak myself out a little bit, because anytime I would say something that just felt a bit wrong, and by wrong I mean that my mother wouldn't approve of, which was pretty much everything, I would kind of recoil again in myself, like go back inside my shell. So I grew up to be very introverted. One of the things, as a kid, I felt like I always had a sort of sense of humor, and I liked to be funny around family when I felt relaxed. Sometimes I would say something, just anything really. I would suddenly get a slap on my face, but it would come from behind. I wouldn't really know when it's coming. That's how I learned to just kind of shut up and be careful with what I say, because what I say can cause a sudden slap in the face. Those were really awful because besides it being a slap and it being very, very unpleasant, just not knowing when it's coming, that traumatized me so much that growing up eventually, and even now as a 30-year-old, if I see some kind of movement here, and it's not even a slapping movement, it's just someone just walks by, or if someone is putting on a coat and I can see like the fabric move, I automatically like flinch. Like, that's my automatic reaction. It's put me in some really uncomfortable positions because this was my trauma and everything I went through. I didn't talk about it until much, much later. I didn't talk about any of this, even to friends, even to close friends. I didn't talk about this openly until I was about maybe 28 or so. And even then, I was never talking about my mom as the villain, because I reached a point as I grew up, I saw her as a villain, but then she kind of groomed me back into being like her number one fan. I would kind of hide that part. It wasn't, it happened in the past. It's okay. It's, you know, it's all is forgiven. There was no apology, but all is forgiven. That's just, I think, a way that our brain tricks us into living through these things and surviving through these things, is to justify it, is to normalize it. Oh, that was in the past, you know, she doesn't hit me anymore, you know, so it's okay. But the violence aspect of abuse and of control is just one little part of the control. Control can be so many other things, and those other ways to control continued until I decided that I was going to escape. For example, when I was around 15, I was allowed, or even, I mean, it wasn't even on my mind because I was really scared of getting close to people. I was always kind of the weird one because I hadn't really kissed a boy until I was like 18 or 19, and I didn't really have a boyfriend, not even those little school boyfriends that, you know, kids say they have when they're like 10 and they have like this boyfriend, but they just hold their hand or they just sit together. Like, I didn't have any of that because I was really scared. I was really scared of people. Men in general, I was really scared of, because obviously, like, my mother, in my brain, she seemed like a saint compared to the evilness of my father. Because there was like, my father is more of a psychopath person. So he's very, you can kind of, there's no masks there. You see that he's just blank. But with my mother, it's different because there is some sort of emotionality there, but it's all driven by narcissism. She does get emotional. She does cry. She does seem to have feelings sometimes, but it's all about her. There's not that empathy. Much later on, when me and this boyfriend that was also abusive, which is typical. It's very typical when you grow up in a home environment that is very abusive. It's typical for you to end up thinking that's normal. That's what you should expect from love, because love is conditional. You have to fight for it. But even then, when, that breakup happened, she managed to make it about herself. She didn't empathize about my sadness about all I went through and how I needed space to recover and go through my own thing, because it was my first and only relationship, but it was also very abusive and very controlling and terrible and just destroyed my self-esteem even more than it was already destroyed. But even then, she would make it about herself by saying, you went through stuff because of your boyfriend? What about me? He had to come over and I had to cook for him. That was awful. I had to listen to his boring conversations. And she would seem genuinely upset about that, which is fine, obviously. But there was no I empathize with you. I see you. I see your pain. She didn't see my pain. She saw my pain cause her pain because it was like a distraction from her. And that was the main thing. But when I was 15, and because I was being controlled, as I was saying, when I was 15 and as I was being controlled and didn't really have the ability to be with friends physically, I would resort a lot, although it was only around in 2007. I would already resort to online chats and talking to people online, and that's how I would make friends. Later, few months, 15, around that, a few months after this thing that I'm going to talk about happened, I then realized, which was once they confronted me, they sit with me, they're like, what have you been talking about with friends online? And I said, just talking with friends, conversations. And they're like, you're talking about us and you're calling us names to your friends. And I said, how do you know that? And first of all, it's normal for teenagers to not like their parents, just in general. Even if I didn't have that abuse history, it would be normal to call a parent annoying or this or that. Like, that's, but there's a very fine line between the normal annoyed teenager at just parents existing, in the realm of the teenage perspective, a teenager feeling so uncomfortable with his or her life that they are considering deleting themselves, for example. But what bothered them, so they found out. So how did they find out that I was talking about them? Was that they installed a program on my computer to record and screenshot everything that I was typing and everything that I was looking at. And at the end of the day, when I would go to bed, they would just sit together and look through my computer and look at everything. And so that's how they found out that I was talking about anything. What I find most strange about this isn't even the weirdness of installing a surveillance thing like that on the computer, but it's the fact that they confronted me, not about the fact that I seemed clearly depressed and there was clearly something wrong with me in the sense of emotionally I was suffering. That wasn't what bothered them. What bothered them was that I was calling them names. So, that's kind of, when that happened, I started getting really paranoid about, am I being stalked? Are they listening to me? And then, I kind of found out, like, anytime I would talk on the phone in the landline, because that was a thing back then, often my mom would be on the other phone, like, listening to the conversations. When you realize that I really already didn't have any privacy because I wasn't allowed to be in my room besides to go to sleep. So there was no computer in the room. There was no, reading in the room. I was always forced to school, ballet class, or whatever other activity that my parents wanted me to be in and that they could control. And then come home, have dinner, and then I would have to forcefully stay with them watching TV until bedtime and then go to bed. That was just the thing. And, there was no closed doors or anything like that. Like, I wasn't even allowed to do that. And then when they found out about me calling them names or whatever, there was like this fight in the house. I mean, there were many, but, my stepfather took the door of my room out. Like, he literally just dismounted it and put it to the side. It's like, okay, you're not going to have a door now. Like, you're 15, you're supposed to discover certain things about yourself. I loved singing in my room and stuff. Like, I wasn't allowed to do that. I was allowed to do that when I lived with my grandma when I was smaller, but then at that age, like, I wasn't allowed to, because first of all, I didn't feel comfortable doing it. And second of all, when I did sing, like in the shower or whatever, they would make fun of me and tell me to shut up and say that I suck. These stories are more related to like pre-18 years old. So then at 18, I got to a point where I got so brainwashed and groomed and manipulated that I kind of accepted it as my fate. And I accepted that I'm the messed up one. I'm the problem. All they've done is because they love me and they care about me and they sacrifice so much for me. They love me. All the narratives that I would hear my mother say sometimes, like, oh, we've done so much for you. I've sacrificed everything for you, but then I wouldn't even question it anymore, because the trauma from the way I was treated and controlled as a teenager was so big. When you have no choice but to adapt that like a fawn response, then that's going to be a response forever until something really big happens. And so from when I was like 18 to when I was 30, everything, like in my perspective of things, everything was fine. Everything wasn't fine when I look back and I see what was going on. But in my perspective, at that time, it was, okay, I'm the messed up one. I'm clearly unstable. I'm the one that needs medication and therapy. And, I'm the one that's causing all this suffering to everybody. So I deserve everything that they've ever done bad to me. So I'm going to try my best to never disappoint them again. So I became the perfect child, or the perfect adult, going to school to get a bachelor's degree, a master's degree. I felt like I owed them because they did so much for me. And by so much, I just mean, not letting me die. So basically I escaped, because you don't leave and you don't break up with a narcissist, you escape. There's no such thing as leaving a narcissistic person. It was on July 23rd of 2023. After, almost being almost done with my PhD and getting a house under my name that would eventually be for them, go figure, something started happening 2 weeks before that kind of made me snap out of it and realize, wait, I've been manipulated into forgetting all that happened in my teenage years, and all that's still happening now because I'm being manipulated. Because even now, I'm 30, and she still tries to make me seem like the insane one, even with the family. She's still like, when I say something and people don't get it, she's like, oh, you know her. She has problems, she has issues. I'm right here. I can hear you. I'm not crazy. It was the kind of attitude, like, and for me, like, the last drop, the absolute, like, snap out of it, like, what is going on here, was with my cats. Having cats, because I wasn't allowed to have pets. They were cruel to the pets that I did try to rescue when I was little. And, they would just be really cruel and, like, abandon them again and stuff like that. So I wasn't really allowed to have pets. I was already living by myself for a while. The breakup had already happened. The pandemic had already happened. And I thought, why am I here alone? I clearly don't have many friends anyway, and I can't be alone all the time, so let me adopt a cat. So the opportunity came and I adopted a cat, and then a few months later I adopted another cat, because I fell in love with it. It needed a home, and I adopted it. I rescued a little cat that was almost died in front of me, and my intention wasn't even to keep it at the time. It was just, I'm gonna rescue this cat because obviously it's over here and it's not okay, it's not doing well. When I come back home with the cat, I tell my mother that I rescued the cat, and she tells me, get that thing away from me. I don't want this in my house. That's strange because the house is mine, and it's a baby. It doesn't matter if it's not a human, that her reaction would have been the same, but it's a little fragile living being that needs nurturing. any human, even people that are not super fond of animals or cannot have pets, would ignore that. No one in their right minds could ignore that. It was fragile and it was crying and it was in my arms. Like, she didn't even look at it. She just, with the most, and that's like one of the moments where I really saw that hate, that coldness that I tried to avoid pinpointing. That was like one of the biggest drops for me, because I was like, oh my gosh. So I put the kitty in the attic. I started living there for the rest of the time because, I wanted to take care of the kitty. And also I started feeling more and more uncomfortable with everything, because I saw her. And then when you see it, you can't unsee it. When you see that your parents that you never really connected with, but then you were kind of brainwashed into idolizing, but then you kind of see that person and the mask totally drops. You can't unsee that. And I couldn't unsee it. Like, I remember talking to my boyfriend and telling him, I can't unsee this. Like, that hate, that pure hate, the fact that she's not even proud or happy or glad that her daughter rescued this little living being. She's angry and disgusted. I just couldn't unsee, And then when I was already, and also, other things happened. She was controlling me. She didn't let me be with my boyfriend. I'm 30 years old. I can't be with my boyfriend in my own house. What is this, I have to go for dinner time. And if my parents were actual royalty, I would understand like the etiquette, but we're people, mid-class people. There's no need for any of this whole control thing. So I started, sleeping in the attic and basically living in the attic, and the ceiling was very low. So I had to like basically crouch while I was walking everywhere. I took my cats there because then it also frightened me. Her reaction with this kitty also frightened me because I didn't like the way she behaved with my cats, her and my stepfather. She would just suddenly sometimes open the window and they would run off, and she would be like, oopsie. But they're not in and out cats. They're just used to home. So, and it's very dangerous where I lived. There's a lot of cars passing. So a tragedy could happen. And for me, my cats are my family. And also that's the other thing. I was like, so they're trying to harm my cats. They're not being nice to them. They would be yelling at them, scaring them on purpose. My cats already were kind of like traumatized, and like any sudden movement, they would like also jumps, which reminded me of when I was a kid and I was like, getting that trauma that sticks with me forever. So, I started living with my cats upstairs. I found a family to adopt the baby cat that I rescued after taking him to the vet and everything, and it was healthy and everything was okay. After all these incidents happened, and I decided, okay, it can't go on. Part of me, when I was angry at that, like when the anger was there, I was like, this can't go on. But then part of me was like, but how can I escape? The answer was obvious. Like it was, right in front of me. Like my boyfriend was like, if you need anything, like I'll talk to my mom. You can maybe stay with us, or, you can arrange something. But like the answer was right in front of me. Like I had a car at the time. I had a job as a researcher. So the answers were right in front of me, but I couldn't see it because for me, it was unthinkable to just leave. It was unthinkable to just stop talking to them. There's this saying I live by, which is like, a goal should scare you a little and excite you a lot. And although in this case it's not really a goal, it was just a thing that I felt like I had to do. And it scared me so much. It scared me to death. It really, really scared me. But there was a part of me that felt excited about the prospect of freedom, of thinking of all the things that I could do if I didn't feel controlled, like even I can wear the tattoos I already have without feeling like I'm going to be judged for them. I can, have my earrings on. I can have bangs. Those are things I would get shit for. I can wear whatever I want. On July 23rd, 2023, I decided to leave. And although it scared me to death, it gave me the freedom I had never dreamed that I would have, ever. Technically, I'm still, I don't have my place. I don't have a house anymore. I don't have a car anymore. Had to sell all those things to be able to pay for the credit that I was left with the mortgage. Eventually, I finally sold the house. Didn't really manage to get anything for myself. And although right now I'm still secluded because I need to protect myself, and they found out my address because, they hacked into my email and all these weird things happened. I'm on my way to pure freedom. I'm making plans to leave the country eventually, be able to have a job and leave the country, to leave the country and start my life. My life already started, and I want to start celebrating the July 23rd as like a birthday. I find that more powerful and to look forward to than actually my birthday, which I'm not like fond of just celebrating a birthday. So that's like a date that I'm eager to celebrate, because it's really the day that I took a deep breath and was like, oh my gosh, I'm so scared, because I lost everything. I left my own house. Over the course of the next few days, I realized that there was no family member that would stick by my side, and that, for them, family is family no matter what. I chose myself, and that was the first time that I really chose me. It was the first time. I had never broken up a friendship. I had never broken up with a boyfriend. I mean, I only had one, but I had never broken up with a boyfriend. And my first breakup of my life was with the first ever relationship I had in my life, was with my birth giver. It's kind of wild, but I wouldn't go back and do anything differently, because I'm free. Like I'm still physically not, but my mind is free, and I can see things so clearly. Everything that happened, I can understand. People often think that cults are this, religion or organization that is secretive, and that everybody's like underground, like saying some words or sentences, or this very straight to the point indoctrination. But there's also a thing called cult of one, which is your relationship with a narcissistic person. And it will feel like a cult and sound like a cult when you tell yourself the story of whatever happened. And it can be a cult. Anything